Hello there, and welcome back to Let's Play Gamebooks. Today's book, Choose Your Own Star Wars Adventure, A New Hope, by Christopher Golden, illustrated by Eric Cherry. Yes, you heard right. Choose Your Own Adventure was so popular that it even stretched out into a galaxy far, far away. And that's what we're going to be reading today. I may not have the physical copy of the book with me, but I have the online versions, and the online versions will do fine.
No, they won't.
The online versions will do fine.
No, they won't. What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? I'm a YouTuber. Mind tricks don't work on me. Only views. No book, no views, no deal.
All right, so let's see how this book begins. Starts with a warning. Do not read this book straight through from beginning to end. These pages contain many different adventures that you may have as Luke Skywalker's best friend. From time to time, as you read along, you will be asked to make a choice. What you decide may mean the difference between a victorious rebel army and a long reign of imperial terror under the Emperor and his minion, Darth Vader. The adventures you have are the result of your choices. You are responsible because you choose. After you make a decision, follow the instructions to find out what happens next. Think carefully before you act. The Force is in you, and you may harness your power for the good of the Rebel Alliance, or you may be seduced by the dark side. It will not always be easy to see the difference between good and evil. You may be forced to sacrifice yourself or your friends for a greater goal. Your life, and indeed the future of the galaxy, depend on the choices you make. Good luck. Interesting that you are going to be Luke Skywalker's best friend. I kind of thought maybe we would be in the role of Luke Skywalker or Leia or something like that. But I guess that's how they're doing it. Okay, let's start the book. You live on your parents' moisture farm on the planet Tatooine, a dust ball covered with wind-driven sands and rolling dunes. You hear the exciting stories of the Empire and the Rebellion, and you dream that soon you'll get off Tatooine. As your best friend, Luke Skywalker, often says, "There's a bright center to the universe. Tatooine is the planet farthest from it." Luke also wants to get off Tatooine to do what so many of your friends have done, attend the Imperial Space Academy and become a pilot. Late one night, you're lying in bed thinking about becoming a fighter pilot. Though you know you should be thinking about the Imperial Navy, your thoughts are more and more of the rebels. There's something cool about the rebels, and everyone knows that the Emperor is evil. Suddenly, you hear a whisper outside your window. Hey, it's Luke. He lives with his Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, who have their own moisture farm not far away. Turn to page 12. "Hi, Luke," he answered quietly. "What brings you here this late? If your uncle finds out you left the farm, he'll be pretty mad." "I'll be in bigger trouble if I don't get our new droid back," Luke mutters. "What do you mean?" you ask. "What happened with the new droid? And which one? The gold protocol droid C-3PO? "No, the little R2 unit," Luke explains. "It was the strangest thing. Uncle Owen had me clean them up, and I triggered a holo recording. The little droid just kept repeating part of the holo vid over and over." "What was it?" you ask. Who was it was more like it," Luke answers. "This girl, the prettiest girl I've ever seen, with a message for someone named Obi-Wan Kenobi. I couldn't get the whole message to play." "Did you try taking off the restraining bolt?" you ask. "Sometimes these bolts can botch other droid functions." "I did that, but that made the droid even more excited, and then the message disappeared completely," Luke says. Turn to page 25. "I'm going to be in so much trouble," Luke continues. "After dinner, I want to check on them, and R2 ran away." "He ran away?" you ask in surprise. "Well, how far can an R2 unit get on the sand?" "Far enough, obviously," Luke replies, frustrated. "So, do you think this Obi-Wan is related to that crazy old hermit Ben Kenobi?" you ask. Luke shrugs. "I asked Uncle Owen about him. He said that Obi-Wan Kenobi lived around here a long time ago, but he's dead now. Anyway, listen, I came over here to ask if you'd come with me tomorrow. I'm taking C-3PO to look for R2, and I could use an extra pair of eyes." "Sure, buddy," you say. "All you have to do is ask." The next morning, you meet Luke bright and early. You'll probably get in trouble for missing breakfast, but Luke needs help, and he's going to get in much bigger trouble if he doesn't bring R2-D2 back to the farm. Meet Luke on page 48. You set off across the desert in Luke's land speeder with C-3PO at the controls. You and Luke search the horizon with handheld scanners trying to find some trace of R2. "I can't believe you're letting a droid pilot your speeder, you say. C-3PO seems upset. I'll have you know that piloting ground effect vehicles like Master Luke's land speeder is one of the secondary functions for which I have been programmed, he sniffs. In addition, it leaves Master Luke free to scan for some sign of R2. You look over and see that Luke is smiling. I forgot to mention that C-3PO is a bit sensitive, he says. The land speeder whips over the wasteland just a few feet above the sand. For nearly an hour, you don't see anything. No sign of the tiny scavengers called Jawas who sold the droids, or even of the sand people called Tusken Raiders who savagely attack, rob, and sometimes kill anyone coming into their territory. There's nothing here, you say, hoping Luke will turn around soon. You've been gone too long, and your parents are likely to be pretty angry. Look around on page 57. There, Luke shouts. You look up to see R2 trundling along the hard-packed desert sand. When you catch up with the droid, Luke is in a rush to take it back to the farm, but R2 beeps and whistles, and C-3PO translates. Apparently, he needs to see Obi-Wan Kenobi. As Luke tries to turn the little droid around, R2's whistles suddenly get louder and frantic. What's he saying, 3PO? You ask. Oh dear, C-3PO says fearfully. R2 says there are several creatures of an unknown type approaching from the southeast. Sand people, Luke cries. Let's take a look. We're doomed, C-3PO wails. Shouldn't we find somewhere to hide instead? Luke agrees with C-3PO and you help him hide the two droids behind some rocky outcroppings. You and Luke climb to the top of a small hill. With scanners, you search for signs of the sand people. You see a pair of banthas, the huge, hairy creatures they ride, but no sand people. Continue your search on page 107. I wonder if we'll ever get to make a choice in this story. Then you hear screams as a Tusken Raider jumps up right in front of you. You shout in alarm and dive out of the way as it attacks you with a club. Luke also jumps clear, but now there are more of them, and you realize they could easily kill you both. You see a hole in their swarm. For a moment, you wonder if you should run. Okay, finally, we get a choice. If you run, turn to page 14. If you stay and fight, turn to page 69. Well, we can't just... Can't just leave our friends. And I don't think the droids can keep up running, so I think we better stay and fight. Okay, let's go to page 69. You decide to stay and fight. Even though you know your situation is hopeless, you can't abandon your best friend. Both of you are knocked down, and you can hear Luke grunt in pain as one of the Tusken Raiders clubs you in the shoulder, and then on the head. As you're about to black out, you hear a horrible roar like the hunting cry of a great dragon. The noise scares the sand people away, and just in time, another few blows and you and Luke might have been killed. You sit up, groggy, and stare at the hooded figure coming toward you. The figure pulls back its hood. You recognize the bearded, white-haired old man immediately. Ben Kenobi, you cry. And hello to you too, Ben replies. Is that Luke Skywalker with you? You shake Luke back to consciousness. He's just as surprised to see Ben as you are. We sure are lucky you came along, you tell Ben. The Jundland wastes are not to be traveled lightly, Ben says. What brings you two out this far? Before you answer, turn to page 83. R2 beeps and whistles from his hiding place, then rolls across the hard-packed sand toward old Ben. This little droid here, Luke says, pointing to R2. I think he's searching for his former master. I've never seen such loyalty in a droid. There's no stopping him. He claims to have been the property of someone named Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is that a relative of yours? Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ben exclaims. Why, that's a name I've not heard in a long time. Then you know him? You ask. Know him? I should think so. He's me, Ben says happily. Then R2 belongs to you? Luke says to Ben. I don't seem to recall ever owning a droid, Ben replies. But we really ought to get inside before the sand people come back. They're easily frightened, but they won't stay away for long. Go with Ben to page 30. Ben leads you to his small home. It's simple, but shelter and basic comfort are all I require, he explains. Ben walks to a corner where he opens a small wooden chest and let me back up. Ben leads you to his small home. It's simple, but shelter and basic comfort are all I require, he explains. Ben walks to a corner where he opens a small wooden chest and retrieves a metal cylinder that looks like a handle with buttons. I was once a Jedi Knight, Ben says. You're a Jedi? You and Luke exclaim together. Yes, Ben continues. A long time ago, when the Jedi were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, I served alongside your father, Luke. My father wasn't a Jedi, Luke says. He was a navigator on a spice freighter. That's what your Uncle Owen wants you to think, Ben explains. The life of a Jedi is dangerous, and your uncle doesn't want that for you. But your father was a cunning warrior, and the best star pilot in the galaxy. He would have wanted you to have this. Ben hands the cylinder to Luke. Luke presses a button and a long beam of light flashes, extending about a meter. This is a lightsaber, the weapon of a Jedi, Ben says. Continue your lesson on page 13. Ben then explains about the Force, the energy field that connects all living things and from which Jedi Knights get their power. But the Force, he explains, has a dark side, to which some Jedi, like his former student Darth Vader, have fallen prey. Suddenly, R2 begins to beep urgently. Go on, R2, you say. Show us this urgent message. General Kenobi, begins a holograph of a beautiful girl. Years ago, you served my father in the Clone Wars. Now we beg you to help us in our struggle against the Empire. I have placed information vital to the security of the rebellion into the memory system of this R2 unit. You must see this droid safely to my father on Alderaan. Please help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Who is she? Luke asks, and you can see that he's intrigued by the girl. She is Princess Leia Organa of the Royal House of the planet Alderaan, Ben explains. Officially, she is an Imperial Senator, but secretly, she is a leader of the Rebel Alliance. A princess? Very impressive. Turn to page 91. Now then, Luke, Ben continues, you and your young friend must learn the ways of the Force if you're to accompany me to Alderaan. Both of you stare at Ben in shock. You have responsibilities to your family, and Luke's uncle, Owen, would be pretty angry if Luke just up and left the planet. On the other hand, you say to Luke, I've been looking for some adventure, and my parents have plenty of help on the farm. I'll bet they'd be proud of me for joining the rebellion. Good for you, Luke says, but not me. I'd like to help you, Ben, but I've been gone so long already. I'll be in big trouble when I get home. I can take you both as far as Anchorhead, and you can get transport to Mos Eisley Spaceport from there. Together, you, Luke, Ben, and the droids leave Ben's home and climb into the Landspeeder for the trip to Anchorhead. Speed along to page 4. We're really jumping around here. Suddenly, you spot smoke on the horizon. Luke pilots the Landspeeder in that direction. It's a huge Jawa sandcrawler, and it's on fire. It has been attacked, and all the Jawas have been killed. At first, it seems as though the Sand People have done it, but on investigation, you discover clues that point to the Imperial soldiers that Ben says are called Stormtroopers. The Stormtroopers probably destroyed the Sandcrawler because they were looking for R2 and C-3PO. You sense great danger. Oh no, Luke exclaims. They must know by now the Jawa sold the droids to Uncle Owen, and that would lead them back home. Luke turns and runs to the Landspeeder. You have only a moment to decide whether to go with him or to stay with Ben and the droids. We'll go with Luke. You want to stay with Ben and learn about the Force. Maybe someday you'll become a Jedi yourself, but even though R2's safety is vital to the rebellion, you know you have to go home with Luke. He's your best friend, and he and his family come first. You jump into the land speeder with Luke and race across the desert. From far away, you can see smoke rising from his aunt and uncle's moisture farm. When you arrive, you stare at the burning buildings of the farm in shock. Luke jumps out. You go after him. "Uncle Owen!" he shouts. "Aunt Beru!" You shout with him. When no one answers, you both know the awful truth. Luke's family is dead. The stormtroopers killed them. "Luke," you say, "I'm sorry." But Luke ignores you. He runs over to his burning home and howls with anger and grief, vowing to take revenge on the Empire. Allow Luke time to grieve and turn to page 90. When Luke gets back into the land speeder to return to Ben and the droids, you realize you can't go with him. After what's happened to Luke's aunt and uncle, you understand that any involvement with the rebellion could be dangerous not only for you, but for your own family. You can't risk that. Instead, you return to your family farm. You work there for the rest of your life, always wondering what became of Luke, Ben, and Princess Leia. The end. Okay. So much for that story. Let's go back, and this time we will stay with Ben and the droids while Luke goes to find out what happened. Okay, page 26. You realize that getting R2 to Alderaan is the top priority. You stay with Ben as Luke jumps in the land speeder and rushes back to the farm alone. While he is gone, you help Ben make a funeral pyre for the Jawas. When Luke returns, he's filled with rage and terrible grief. The stormtroopers have destroyed the farm and killed his aunt and uncle. "There was nothing you could have done, Luke," you say. "Indeed," Ben agrees. "If you had been there, you would have been killed as well, and the droids would now be in the hands of the Empire." "I want to come with you to Alderaan," Luke says, "to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father." You're interested too. Turn to page 114. I was thinking we'd have a little more agency, but I guess we're just acting out the movie as kind of an extra character. You've never been to Mos Eisley Spaceport before. It has the reputation of being a hangout for the worst criminals in the galaxy. But you all know it's the only place to find a pilot with a ship to take you from Tatooine to Alderaan. Once you arrive, Ben guides everyone to a local cantina, then disappears into the crowd. You sit and have a drink of water with Luke. Soon, Ben joins you at the bar and introduces you to a huge, furry Wookiee. Chewbacca is the first mate and co-pilot on a ship that should suit our needs. His captain is over at that table, a man named Han Solo. We'll see if we can buy our passage to Alderaan, Ben explains. Follow Chewbacca to page 92. Chewbacca leads you across the bar to a rugged-looking man sitting alone. He wears high black boots, a black vest, and a blaster on his hip. "Can I help you, gents?" the man asks. "Captain Solo, I presume," Ben says. "We hear you've got a fast ship," you say. "I've outrun Imperial starships, if you're worried about speed," Han Solo replies. "The Falcon's fast enough for you, kid." Ben and Han talk money, and the deal is done. You've got a ship to take you to Alderaan, but suddenly you find yourself thinking more about the farm and your family. You know your parents will be proud of you when they hear of your adventure, but you're going to miss them, and you didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. If you make your way back home, turn to page 7. If you go with the others, turn to page 85. Just out of curiosity, let's see what happens if we go back home. I'm guessing we probably end up staying on Tatooine forever. A short while later, you watch the Millennium Falcon take off and leave the planet. You wander around Mos Eisley looking for someone to take you back to your parents, but you have no money and no one will help you. Soon, the twin suns begin to set and the streets grow dark. Finally, you meet a courier named Capri Adi. She doesn't have room for a passenger in her loaded messenger vehicle, but she'll take a message to your parents and bring back whatever money they send. Capri Adi leaves, and there is nothing you can do but wait for her. You go back into the cantina and ask the bartender, a man named Wooer, if he's hiring. The many alien races frighten you, but you need to make some money if you want to have a place to sleep and food to eat until Capri returns. "So your friends have left you on your own. Well, this place is pretty tough," Wooer warns. Calling up all your courage, you reply, "So am I." "You're hired then," the bartender says. Maybe I'll even forget you came in here with those rebels. Wuher seems nice enough, but later that night you learn that he supports the Empire. Find out more on page 49. I'm telling ya, Wuher roars to a pair of stormtroopers leaning against the bar. I just don't get this whole rebellion business. I mean, we don't bother the Emperor, and he doesn't bother us. Am I right? What does it matter to a little backwater planet like Tatooine who's in charge? Heck, we don't want anybody to notice us. The stormtroopers seem to laugh along with Wuher, but you're angered by his words. The Emperor is evil, a tyrant who enslaves whole planets. But you're not sure you should say that out loud. Unfortunately, not everyone is smart enough to see that, the stormtrooper admits, his voice sounding electric through the white helmet of his armor. We actually chased a ship out of here today, the Millennium Falcon, filled with rebels. But they're in for trouble, all right. We're searching for them all over the galaxy. Oh no, you think Luke is in for it now. You worry about Luke, Ben, and even Princess Leia. You start to wish you'd gone with Luke in the first place. The next night, you go to work at the cantina again. A few hours later, Capri Audi returns. I told your parents more about your situation than you wrote in the note, she admits. I know, Han Solo, and I know about your friends dodging the Imperials on the Falcon. She must have been convincing, because the note from your parents says that they're proud of you and will support whatever decision you make. At the same time, they miss you and wish you were home. Along with their message, they've sent a lot of money. Now that you have the money and your parents' approval, you can do whatever you want. If you go home, turn to page 52. If you hire a ship to warn Luke of his danger, turn to page 95. Neither one sounds like a great option. What happens if we go home? You realize you can't just leave your family and your life on Tatooine. Plus, if you try to find Luke on your own, sooner or later someone is sure to identify you as having been with Luke, Ben, and the droids, and you'll be arrested. The stormtroopers might even attack your parents and destroy your farm the way they did Luke's aunt and uncle. You can't take that risk. You must leave Mos Eisley immediately. At home, your parents are thrilled you've returned. Your mother has been especially worried about you. You work hard on the farm and occasionally hear stories about the daring rebels defying the Emperor. You never see Luke Skywalker again, but you think of him and of the rebellion every night as you look up at the stars. Okay, we've pretty thoroughly seen what happens if you stay, so let's get off at Tatooine. If we hire a ship to warn Luke of his danger, what happens? Capri Audi helps you find a freighter captain willing to carry you to Alderaan. She buys you a soda while you wait for the ship to be prepared. I've got to get back to work, Capri says, after draining her glass. Tell Han Solo I send my love. You're sad that Capri is leaving. After all, she's the only person you trust in Mos Eisley. But there's nothing more you can do. You need to warn Luke and the others that the Empire is onto them. Hey, Wuher shouts, marching out of the stockroom to point a finger in your face. What are you doing? I'm not paying you to sit around and mope. Sorry, Wuher. I have to quit, you say. You almost tell him that you're leaving the planet, but you remember his loyalty to the Empire. The less he knows, the better. I'm going back to my parents' farm, you say. Well, how do you like that? Wuher shouts angrily. I take pity on you, give you a job, and this is what I get. You take off without even saying thank you. Thank you? You mutter. Yeah, just get out of here, Wuher shouts. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Where was that? Turn to page 8. Just then, the freighter captain you've hired taps you on the shoulder and gestures for you to follow him. The ship is ready, and it's time to go. As you leave the cantina, you see Wuher talking to 2 stormtroopers. He points at you. Let's go, you urge the captain. The 2 of you hurry into the dusty streets of Mos Eisley. Halt! Someone shouts behind you. Run! You cry, shoving the captain ahead of you. I'm not running from Imperial stormtroopers, the captain replies. You're on your own, friend. You turn to see the stormtroopers clomping down the street after you, their weapons drawn. Wuher must have told them that you were with Luke and Ben before they boarded the Falcon and blasted past Imperial ships. You're not surprised. You turn a corner into a narrow alley. A slowly shambling Ronto almost blocks your path. You squeeze by and then run like crazy, hoping the huge leathery animal will slow down the stormtroopers enough for you to get away. Maybe you'll escape after all. You start to smile. Turn to page 104. Unfortunately, another platoon of stormtroopers appears, blocking your path. You can hear the first group coming up behind you. You're trapped. There's only one thing left to do. Surrender. You drop to your knees and lace your fingers behind your head. That's right, rebel, the stormtrooper captain growls as he binds your wrists with shackles. Just don't move and you'll live, at least until we hand you over for questioning. You are herded on board an Imperial transport and kept in a holding cell until you arrive at the Imperial battle station the stormtroopers call the Death Star, the biggest artificial structure you've ever seen. On the Death Star, you're brought to the prison level. A small door slides open, and you see that you are face to face with the woman from the hologram. Princess Leia? You ask in astonishment. The stormtroopers glance at each other. By letting them know that you recognize Leia, you've virtually admitted to being part of the rebellion. When you're alone, the princess stares at you. Do I know you? She asks. Answer on page 41. No, you say. I'm Luke Skywalker's friend. Luke who? She asks. Oh, right, you don't know. I helped Luke get R2-D2 and your message to Ben Kenobi, you explain. No, she cries. Kenobi has been captured too? No, you explain. He and Luke took the droids and hired a smuggler to get to Alderaan. They'll get there, Princess. You can count on Luke. A smuggler? Leia asked bitterly. Suddenly, the door to your cell whooshes open. 2 stormtroopers enter. They grab you and drag you away. Here it comes, you think. They're going to kill me. Instead, you're dragged to the command deck of the Death Star. A gray-haired older man in the uniform of a high-ranking Imperial officer and a very tall man in black armor and a black flowing cape stare down at you. The black-armored man is the most terrifying being you have ever seen. You're so scared you can't even look at him. Petrified, try to turn to page 3. I am the Grand Moff Tarkin, the gray-haired man explains. This is Darth Vader. You are silent, afraid that anything you might say will make Tarkin and Vader angry. Who is on the Millennium Falcon? Tarkin demands. I don't know, you reply. Another lie will kill you, Vader booms. His deep voice strikes greater fear in your heart. Luke Skywalker, you admit, ashamed, but just knowing the name won't help them. And Ben Kenobi. Kenobi? Vader thunders. Obi-Wan Kenobi? Where did they go? Tarkin demands. You're terrified, but you can't betray Luke. I don't know, you lie. Kenobi wouldn't say. I sense the Force in you, Vader whispers. I could make you a powerful weapon. The Force? You whisper. In me? I will offer you a chance to live, Tarkin says, as well as wealth and power as an officer in the Imperial Navy. You stare at Tarkin in shock. An Imperial officer? Turn to page 105. Well, this has gotten off the rails. What do you want from me? You manage to ask. Your first act as a lieutenant in the Imperial Navy, Tarkin explains, will be to return to your cell and convince Princess Leia that you support the rebellion. Do whatever you must, but find out from her the location of the rebel headquarters. And if I say no, you ask, that's not an option, Tarkin replies. You consider Tarkin's offer carefully. If he is telling the truth, you'll become an Imperial officer. With the security, wealth, and power of your position, you might be able to keep Tarkin and Vader from killing Luke, but you can't save anybody if you're dead. If you refuse the offer, turn to page 10. If you agree to help the Empire, turn to page 117. Let's see what happens if we refuse. I mean, we'll probably be dead, but it's the principle of the thing. We won't be the first to die to keep them from winning. You look at the black helmet covering Vader's face and the cold evil in Tarkin's eyes, and you realize that your life means nothing to them. Eventually, they'll kill you. Now or later, it makes no difference. If you agree to spy on Leia, you're only postponing the inevitable. Forget it, you hear yourself say. Tarkin narrows his eyes and glares at you angrily. He gestures to the stormtroopers who brought you in. Terminate him, Tarkin sneers. Immediately! Even though you felt courageous a moment earlier, the actual order for your death makes you sick with fear. No, Vader barks. The Force is in this one. Not strong, but it's there. Sometime in the spice mines on Kessel might make for a more willing soldier and student. Beings with the Force are rare. Killing them should be our last resort. Tarkin seems to consider Vader's words, and then nods to the stormtrooper. To Kessel, then, he says. You can't believe your luck. You're going to live. for now. Vader approaches you and says, "Perhaps one day you will change your mind. Then you will be useful to me. If not, you will die in those mines." Face or Fate on page 108. Oh, that rhymes. You know better than to say anything else. Let Vader think what he wants. If you're alive, no matter where you are, it's gotta be better than being executed. Or at least that's what you think, until an Imperial transport delivers you to Kessel. Immediately, you're put to work in the darkest, most dangerous part of the mine. You can barely breathe. You've got to watch your back at all times, for fear that another prisoner may try to rob or kill you, and you never ever get to breathe fresh air or see the light of day. It's horrible, hellish. After a few years, you don't care about anything anymore, not your family, or Luke, or even the rebellion. You find yourself hoping, praying for Vader to come for you, but he never does. Whether he's dead or has forgotten you doesn't matter. All it means is you'll never get off this horrible planet. Never. The end. Okay, let's see what would have happened if we had taken Tarkin's deal. "Thank you," he managed to say, though it's hard to speak the words. "I will find the location of the rebel base." Tarkin is obviously pleased, but Vader is silent. He doesn't trust you. The problem is, you aren't sure you trust yourself. It would be so easy to go along with Tarkin's plan. After all, you don't really know much about the rebellion. Ben Kenobi might just be a crazy old man who's pulled Luke into something very dangerous and misguided. You are put back in your cell, where Leia waits. "I kept waiting for them to torture me, but they didn't," you tell her. "They just kept asking me where Luke and Ben were heading on the Millennium Falcon, and where the rebel base is. I assumed that you sent Ben to Alderaan because that's where the base was, so I didn't tell them that's where Luke went." "Luke is lucky to have a friend like you," Leia says, obviously touched by your pretense of loyalty. You feel guilty, and you almost blurt out the truth, but you can't. So much depends on keeping your pact with Tarkin, like saving Luke's life, and Leia's for that matter. "I just hope Luke can get to the rebel base on Alderaan in time," you say. The princess looks at you oddly a moment, her eyes narrowed, as if she's trying to make up her mind about something. "The base isn't on Alderaan," she says in a whisper, trusting you with the truth. "That's just where my father is, and he's part of the rebellion. The rebel base is on Yavin 4. You stare at her. You've never even heard of Yavin 4. But now that she's told you where the base is, you wish you didn't know, because now you have to do something with that information. If you choose to lie to Tarkin and Vader, turn to page 109. If you betray Leia, turn to page 72. Let's choose the dark side. Okay, we're going to betray Leia and tell Tarkin about it. You decide that keeping Luke alive, and keeping yourself alive as well, are more important goals than the security of the rebel base. Even if the base is destroyed, you reason, the rebels may come back over time to defeat the Empire. You must think of your friends and yourself first. You know that Leia won't understand what you're about to do, but you have chosen to save her life, Luke's, and your own, no matter what the cost. "I'm sorry," you say, and turn away from her, going to the door to your cell. "Sorry?" she asks. "What for?" You pound on the door and call for the guards to let you out. "What are you doing?" Leia shouts, enraged. "You traitor! You can't tell them or we're all dead! Don't you understand?" "I'm sorry," you say again. "It's best for all of us this way, Princess. I've been offered a commission in the Imperial Navy and have a responsibility to the Empire." Turn to page 82. A moment later, stormtroopers enter and lead you back to the command deck, where Darth Vader waits for your report. You're afraid he'll doubt your word, but you hope he'll sense the truth in you, the way he sensed the Force there earlier. "You have the location of the rebel base so quickly?" Vader asks, surprised. "Yes," you reply. "It's on Yavin 4. "Princess Leia is more trusting than I'd imagined. Or you are more persuasive," Vader says as he eyes you suspiciously. "Or perhaps you are lying to me." "No, Lord Vader," you stammer. The base is on Yavin 4. I hope that you'll spare the life of the princess. She's no threat to anyone now that you know the location of the rebel base." "If you're telling the truth, Princess Leia will be transported to the spice mines of Kessel and imprisoned there for life rather than executed. You see, the Empire is nothing if not fair, Lieutenant. I will see to it that your boon is granted," Vader rasps. "If you're lying, you will both be executed," he adds. Find out if Vader believes you on page 38. I'm not lying, you say, wishing that you were. Excellent, Vader replies. We were going to destroy Alderaan, but with the plans for the Death Star in Rebel hands, we must move to quickly destroy their base on Yavin 4. Then we may worry about other displays of power for the Emperor. Vader orders the stormtroopers to get you a proper uniform for a lieutenant in the Imperial Navy, and then leaves you on the bridge. He has fulfilled his side of the bargain. You have sided with the Empire, but the guilt you feel at betraying your friends is great. You console yourself with the knowledge that you saved Luke and the entire planet of Alderaan. The rebels still have the plans for the Death Star. It's possible that they'll be able to use them. Less than a standard day later, shortly before the commanders of the Death Star plan to destroy Yavin 4, Rebel forces launch a heavy attack on the space station as X-Wing fighters dive into the wide central trench around the Death Star. Grand Moff Tarkin thinks their attack is ridiculous, but you overhear an engineer say that if the rebels hit the right spot, the Death Star could be destroyed. Turn to page 32. Uh-oh. As alarms clang and sirens wail, a stormtrooper runs up to you. Lieutenant, he yells, we've got several rebel ships in our landing bay. Why would they board the Death Star, you shout? They're trying to blow up this station. Then it hits you. Princess Leia is one of the most important people in the rebellion. When Luke and the others joined the rebels, they must have learned that Leia's ship had been taken by the Empire and realized that she was a prisoner aboard the Death Star. They've come to rescue her. You've known Luke Skywalker your whole life. He would definitely have come along on such a crazy mission. You don't want Luke to die, and if there's any chance the Death Star will be destroyed, you'd like to get off the space station with him. You pray that he'll understand why you had to reveal the rebel base's location. Come with me, you tell the stormtrooper. You go to the prison level with the stormtrooper and drag Leia from her cell. Turn to page 64. You again, she shouts. What do you want from me now? Isn't it enough that you've betrayed the entire rebellion? Have you come to execute me now? Quiet, you bark. Your rebel friends have boarded this station. I'm going to bring you to them. The stormtrooper stops in his tracks. I'm sorry, Lieutenant, he says. I can't do that. Escort the prisoner. That's an order, you snap. We're not handing the princess over. We're using her as bait. The threat of her death will make the others surrender. That will please Vader. You and the stormtroopers hurry Leia towards the landing bay. If you decide to use Leia to force the rebels to surrender, go to page 84. If you decide to aid the rebels and help Leia escape, turn to page 23. If you decide to play it by ear, turn to page 93. All right, this could be interesting. Let's switch sides again and let's help Leia escape. Quietly, you stun the stormtrooper walking with Leia. As he drops to the floor, Leia turns and stares at you. You pick up the fallen stormtrooper's blaster and hand it to her. What? She fumbles for something to say. Why did you do that? Whatever you may think of me, I saved your life and the lives of Luke, Ben, and everyone on Alderaan by betraying the location of the rebel base, you tell her. Now, if we can all get out of here before the rebels blow up the Death Star, I think we've done pretty well. You don't expect me to believe this was your plan all along, do you? Leia says angrily. You gave up the location of the rebel base to save your own hide. You can believe what you want, you tell her. Leia hides out of sight while you call out to the stormtroopers to withdraw, saying that Vader has called for them on the control deck. Once they leave, you rush to the landing bay, where the Millennium Falcon awaits. Luke, you cry as you greet each other warmly. Enjoy your reunion on page 65. Luke introduces himself, Han Solo, and Chewbacca to the princess. Leia is very gracious. She doesn't say anything about your earlier betrayal, which you're grateful for. Let's get out of here now, Luke says. This whole place is going to go. Just then, more stormtroopers rush in. You and the other rebels blast at them. You all dash aboard the Millennium Falcon. You've barely pulled the ramp closed behind you when you see Vader striding towards you in a rage. As the Falcon blasts out of the landing bay, you breathe a long sigh of relief. Behind you, the Death Star suddenly explodes. Obviously, the rebels put the plans Leia stashed in R2 to good use. Ben Kenobi sends his best, Luke tells Leia. He's on Alderaan with your father, and we're headed back that way now. Then Luke turns to you and points at your uniform. I want to hear all about your adventures in the Imperial Navy, he says with a smile. Turn to page 74. The rebellion has taken a decisive victory in the battle against the Empire. The tide of war has turned, and it won't be long now before the Empire is crushed completely. but you feel a terrible guilt about your betrayal of Leia, even though you were only trying to do what you thought was best. It's a guilt that, in spite of Leia's silence, will haunt you for your entire life. You are determined to fight bravely against the Emperor until the galaxy is safe from his evil, hoping to somehow make up for your betrayal. Eventually, Ben Kenobi will start a new order of Jedi Knights with you, Luke, and Leia as his first students. The end. Wow, well that got really off the rails, but it's a pretty interesting ending, actually. And despite our betrayal, it wasn't all bad. We did manage to save the entire population of Alderaan, and the rebellion still won in the end, so it'd be interesting how the trilogy would have turned out if at the end of A New Hope, Vader was dead, and Alderaan was still around, and Obi-Wan Kenobi was still alive. Alright, this time we're going to go with the Millennium Falcon to Alderaan. You may never have another chance to do something so important. If getting the droids to Alderaan will help the rebellion against the Empire, you've got to go. The rebellion must come first. So you're coming? Luke says hopefully. Wouldn't miss it, you reply. After all, if I don't come along, who will keep you out of trouble? You laugh together, and you know for certain that you've made the right decision. After selling the Landspeeder, you go with Luke, Ben, and the droids to the docking bay where the Falcon is waiting. After all Han's bragging, I can't wait to see this great starship of his, you tell Luke as you enter the hangar. Inside, however, the Falcon turns out to be less impressive than you imagined. In fact, it looks like a junk heap. What a piece of junk! Chewbacca roars his disapproval about these comments, but you have to agree with Luke. What a wreck, you say. Turn to page 44. Listen, kids, Han snarls angrily. She may not look like much, but she'll make 0.5 past light speed, and she can outrun any Imperial ship. Plus, she's armed to the teeth. You better watch it. Chewie and I are kind of sensitive about people making fun of our ship. I'm sure it happens a lot, you mumble. Han just glares at you. Moments later, you board the ship. Han, who's doing a last-minute check on the ship's exterior, is the only one not on board when the blaster fire starts. Han, you cry as you and Luke rush to the ramp to help him. Chewbacca roars and Ben translates, telling you to keep your seats. That Captain Solo will be along in a moment. Oh my, C-3PO says worriedly behind you. I hope we'll be all right. R2 beeps and whistles. Well, yes, of course I realize that Captain Solo is in jeopardy also, but oh, never mind, you insufferable rust bucket. C-3PO huffs. Rush to page 39. Han dashes up the ramp and closes it behind him. Then he runs to the cockpit and drops into the pilot seat. Imperial troops, I'd imagine, Ben says, as calmly as if you weren't in any danger at all. Yeah, somebody doesn't want us taking off without clearance, Han replies gruffly. They're in for a rude awakening. To your surprise, the Falcon performs as well as Han bragged. Seconds later, the ship roars up into the sky over Tatooine and then into the atmosphere of the planet, dodging fire from the ground. In space, you discover two giant vessels several thousand times larger than Han Solo's little freighter. Imperial cruisers, Han shouts. You guys are even more popular with the Empire than I thought. To know us is to love us, you joke, but Han isn't in the mood for laughing, and neither is anybody else. The cruisers give chase. Turn to page 11. They want our hides, and bad, Han says grimly. Why don't you outrun them, Luke says. I thought you said this thing was fast. Watch your mouth, kid, or you're going to find yourself floating home, Han warns. Chewie, the navigation computer is set. Hit the hyperdrive. Chewbacca does as he's told, and the Falcon lurches forward. Space bends around the ship. Stars whip by faster than the eye can see, and then you're in hyperspace, traveling so fast that the huge Imperial cruisers will never catch you. Later, as you travel through hyperspace toward Alderaan, a trip that will take some time, R2 and 3PO play holo games. Han takes the opportunity to make some minor repairs to damage sustained during your escape from Tatooine, which leaves you and Luke to press Ben with more questions about the Force and being a Jedi Knight. Turn to page 50. I want to know more about the Force, Ben, Luke says. Does it control your actions? Partially, Ben tells him, but it also obeys your commands. Mastery of the Force demands calm and patience. I'm going to teach you both how to sense the power that exists in all things, that binds us and connects us to the universe and to each other. And so Ben begins to teach you and Luke how to feel the Force, to use it as an extension of your senses. You train for quite a bit, using Luke's lightsaber to deflect energy bolts shot at you from a small hovering ball. You have some success in your training and can block some of the shots, but Luke surges ahead immediately. Obviously, he has far more natural talent than you do. Suddenly, Ben cries out in pain and holds a hand to his head. You and Luke reach out to steady him. "What is it, Ben?" you ask. "I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear that something terrible has happened." "What could it be?" Turn to page 54. "Strap yourselves in, folks," Han calls from the front of the ship. "We're going to be dropping out of hyperspace in a minute. We're coming up on Alderaan." A moment later, the ship lurches. "What the? Chewie, increase power to the deflector shields," Han shouts. "What is it?" you ask. "We've dropped out of hyperspace right in the middle of some kind of meteor shower," Han replies. "There shouldn't be anything like that near Alderaan," Ben says anxiously. Chewbacca roars in his agreement. "Well, our position is correct," Han snaps, "but Alderaan is gone." Did you hear Han correctly? Turn to page 66. "What do you mean, gone?" Luke asks. "Where is it?" "That's what I'm trying to tell you, kid," Han says. "It ain't there. It's been totally blown away." "Destroyed by the Empire," Ben whispers. "I should have realized when I felt that disturbance earlier." "An entire Starfleet couldn't destroy a whole planet," Han says. "It'd take 1,000 ships with more firepower than I've ever..." Han is interrupted by a beeping on the console. The Millennium Falcon is passed by an Imperial TIE fighter. Everyone is confused. It's a short-range ship, and there aren't any planets close enough for it to have been launched from. "Catch it before it can report in about our location," you say. "It's headed for that small moon," Luke points. You see the moon in the distance. His voice filled with dread, Ben says, "That's no moon. It's a space station." "What?" Han barks. "You're even crazier than I thought, old man. Look at the size of the thing. It's way too big to be a space..." Chewbacca growls in distress. Han stares out of the cockpit. "I have a very bad feeling about this," Luke says. "Han," you say, "Ben's right. Turn the ship around." "Yeah, good idea," Han grumbles. But Han can't turn the ship around. The huge space station has the Falcon in a tractor beam too powerful to break. Han is forced to shut the power down and wait to be pulled aboard the station. "You're not going to get me without a fight," Han declares. "You can't win," Ben sadly announces. "But there are alternatives to fighting." Chewie unsnaps his harness and stands up, growling something to Han. "You're right, Chewie," Han says. "It's our only chance. Come on, people, get moving," he continues. "We don't want anybody finding us when the Imperials come aboard the ship." Hurry to page 18. Han reveals hidden compartments in the floor of the starship that are usually used for smuggling illegal goods. It's hot and dark in the belly of the Falcon, but you keep as still as possible when the Imperial troops board the ship. Believing the ship to be abandoned, the troops leave, and you all climb out of the hidden compartments. "That was easy," you say. "We fooled them." "Great," Han says sarcastically. "Now what? Even if I could take off again, we'd never get past that tractor beam." "Leave that to me," Ben says. Just then, a scanning crew comes up the ramp of the Falcon to do a more thorough search of the ship. Han and Chewie knock them out and then call down into the landing bay for the stormtroopers. When the troopers come up, you blast them and take their armor. Dressed as troopers, you, Han, and Luke make your way to the landing bay's command center, blasting through the small crew. A moment later, Ben, Chewie, 3PO, and R2 join you. Enter the command center on page 36. "Wow, with all that blasting, it's a wonder the whole station doesn't know we're here," Luke says. "Bring 'em on," Han snarls. "I prefer a straight fight to all this sneaking around." "Yeah, that's a good idea," you say sarcastically. "A few 100,000 Imperial soldiers against 5 blasters and 2 droids." "Watch it, kid," Han snaps at you. R2 beeps and whistles, drawing your attention. "Excuse me, Master Luke," 3PO says, "but R2 has accessed the main computer, and he's found the control to the tractor beam." "Great," Luke cries. "Let's go." "No, Luke," Ben says. "I must do this alone. You must see the droids delivered safely to the rebellion, or other systems will suffer the same fate as Alderaan. Your destiny lies along a different path than mine. The Force will be with you. Always." Take your leave on page 102. Ben leaves. Han shakes his head. Where did you two dig up that old fossil? He asks, laughing. Ben is a great man, Luke snaps. Yeah, great at getting us into trouble. Well, I didn't hear you come up with any ideas, Captain, you say angrily, joining Luke to defend Ben. Hey, Han shrugs. Anything would be better than hanging around here waiting for stormtroopers to pick us up. R2 begins beeping excitedly again, his high-pitched whistles hurting your ears. Master Luke, 3PO says excitedly. R2 says he's found her. This is extraordinary. She's here on the space station, sir. Detention block AA-23. What is this droid talking about? Turn to page 110. Who's here, you ask? Princess Leia, 3PO replies. She's on the prison level, and I'm afraid she's scheduled to be terminated. Terminated? We've got to help her. We've got to figure out a way to get her, Luke gasps. I'm not going anywhere, Han comments. Look, Han, Luke says, a few minutes ago you complained about just sitting around. They're going to kill her. Well, better her than me, Han says. Chewie growls in agreement. Han has a point. It's not much better than a suicide mission to try to rescue Princess Leia, but you know she plays a valuable role in the rebellion. The idea of leaving her to die is not very heroic. You're uncertain of what to do. If you think it's too risky to rescue Leia, turn to page 59. If you think that you should rescue Leia, turn to page 19. Well, let's get off the rails a bit and see what happens if we don't rescue Leia. Listen, Luke, you say, Ben told us to wait here. I mean, he used to be a Jedi Knight, right? He knows what he's doing, and I think we should wait until he comes back to decide what we do next. But they're going to kill her, Luke argues. We can't just leave her there. Okay, Han says, listen up. Even if you're right, and we have a reason to go running off on some suicide mission to rescue a girl I've never even seen, Han points at you. Your friend here is right. The old man is running this show, at least for the moment. We should wait for him to come back. If he can't turn the tractor beam off, nobody's leaving here anyway. Luke glares at you, defeated. He must have expected you to help convince Han, you realize, but you're not eager to get yourself killed. Sorry, you say, and shrug. Turn to page 111. Then you turn to 3PO. The golden humanoid droid is standing in a corner by the computer console with R2. 3PO, you say, ask R2 to monitor all transmissions for any mention of Ben, the Falcon, or the tractor beams. R2's dome head spins around so that the eye-like lens on his dome faces you. The droid beeps and whistles loudly. R2, 3PO chides the droid. Don't be rude. I'm sorry, you say, I don't speak astromech. Of course not, 3PO says. R2 is just reminding you, and none too politely, that just because you don't understand his language, that does not mean that he has trouble understanding yours. He would prefer if you did not speak of him as if he were not here. Oh, you say, embarrassed. Tell him... There I go again. Sorry, R2. R2 chirps pleasantly and goes back to monitoring the computer. Droids. Can't live with them, can't live without them. Turn to page 99. A short time later, as you sit in the landing bay's silent command center, Luke cries out in pain. Luke! You shout. Kid, what is it? Han asks. Chewbacca roars and the droids approach. When Luke looks up, his face is stricken with sorrow. It's Ben, he says. He's dead, killed by Darth Vader. I felt him. He spoke to me. The tractor beam is off. We've got to get out of here, now. I didn't feel anything, you say, somehow disappointed that your small measure of talent with the Force could not detect Ben's message. If the old man's dead, we've really got to go, Han says, moving toward the door. But what about the princess, you ask? We got it. We're going to get her out first, Luke says bravely. Han, you and Chewie can go get the Falcon prepped if you want. I'm not leaving here without Princess Leia. Just then, alarms squeal loudly throughout the space station. You cover your ears and wince in pain at the noise. Turn to page 27. I guess waiting around wasn't such a good idea after all. Master Luke, 3PO cries. They found us, sir. Chewbacca roars and Han agrees. Let's move it, folks. No time for rescuing anybody but ourselves. But Leia, Luke starts to protest. You stop him, grabbing his wrist. Luke, you say, if they notice the tractor beam is off, we'll never get out of here, and Ben will have died for nothing. He left you here so that you could get R2 to the rebellion in case he didn't make it. Don't let him down now. You can hear the clattering of armored stormtroopers approaching, and Luke gives in. Stormtroopers burst into the landing bay as R2 and 3PO are slowly moving up the ramp. You and Luke stay below and return fire while Chewie and Han get the ship's engines fired. We're ready to go! Han shouts from the ship. The ramp begins to close. There he is, Luke cries. You see that Darth Vader has entered the landing bay with a platoon of stormtroopers. Turn to page 42. Luke leaps from the closing ramp and starts blasting away at Vader. Vader's lightsaber erupts in pure energy, and he easily deflects the blaster bolts. Han, you cry, hold on, Luke's gone crazy. You leap down after Luke as the ramp stops halfway up. Luke, come on, you're going to get us all killed. You go, he shouts. Vader killed my father, and now he's killed Ben. I can't let him live. You grab Luke by the shoulders and spin him to face you. You'll have another chance, Luke, you say. I promise, but now we've got to go. The rebellion comes first. Luke hesitates, then nods. He fires off another round at Vader and then turns to see Chewbacca on the ramp, reaching down to lift you both up into the Falcon. Jump aboard and get to page 45. Even as Vader's stormtroopers fire on the ship, the ramp closes and the Millennium Falcon rockets out of the space station landing bay, free of the tractor beam. Unfortunately, though you have the plans for the space station hidden inside R2, only Leia knows the location of the secret rebel base. For weeks, Han uses all his contacts to try to get in touch with the rebellion. When finally the curtain of secrecy is drawn aside, it's too late. The Death Star, the battle station upon which Ben was killed, has already discovered and destroyed the hidden rebel base. It isn't total victory for either side. You have the plans for the Death Star, and a tyrant like the Emperor always breeds rebellion. Surely you and your friends can raise rebel forces of your own, but that will take time. The fight against the Empire will rage on with no clear victory for many years. The end. Alright. I guess we needed to rescue Leia, so let's go back and do that. She's beautiful, Han, you say, hoping a pretty girl will get his attention. It doesn't. But Luke has another idea. She's rich, Luke says. A princess? You'll get a huge reward if you save her life. We'll get a huge reward, huh? Han asks. Absolutely, Luke says. Han stares at Luke a moment. Finally, he declares, I'd better. Leaving the droids in the landing bay command center, you, Luke, and Han, in your stormtrooper uniforms, escort Chewbacca, who pretends to be a prisoner, to the prison level of the station. When the door opens to the block of cells where Princess Leia is being kept, you open fire again, blasting the guards as they fire at you. Blast your way to page 55. You shoot out the cameras in the prison block, and Luke silences the blaring alarm. You are now in the prison control room. From outside the block, an officer is shouting questions over the comm in response to the alarm. Detention level AA23. What's happening? What's going on down there? The voice on the comm asks anxiously. Han goes to the console. He's nervous, and you worry that he won't know the right thing to say to the officer. If he can only figure out the right procedure or codes to keep the stormtroopers from investigating for a few minutes, you'll be gone. This is detention level AA23. Everything's under control down here. Situation normal, Han says. We had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you? Bad move. Find out why on page 62. We're sending a squad to your current location right now, the officer says. Negative, Han says, fumbling. We had a reactor leak down here. Give us a few minutes to lock it down. Largely very dangerous. Who is this? The officer barks. What's your operating number? You see that Han has run out of patience, but you need to keep the stormtroopers away for a few more minutes. Your actions may spell the difference between getting everyone off the space station alive and getting everyone killed. If you take over the console, turn to page 67. If you let Han blast away, turn to page 20. Quick, to the console! Han points his blaster at the communications console, but you step in front of him before he can fire. Han, no, you say. You turn to the console. I asked for your operating number, the officer barks. I'm sorry, sir, you bluff. We had a detention officer go a bit stir-crazy down here. He discharged his own weapons, shot the place up a bit, and then started babbling on about radiation. What kind of a show are you running down there? The officer asks angrily. And what is your operating number? That is a question you don't want to have to answer. Obviously, this must be how they recognize one another, you think, but number rather than name. Can you just make up a number? The officer is sure to know it's a fake. Look for a number on page 46. You look around for Luke to help, but he's already run down into the cell block to find Princess Leia. Then your toe hits the unmoving body of one of the detention officers Chewbacca blasted. His cap has been knocked off, and inside on the band, it's a 9-digit number. It could be nothing. A way to identify laundry, maybe. But it's your only chance. I'm getting impatient, the officer barks over the comm. I'm sorry, sir, you say. I was just issuing orders to have this wild man locked up until we can get a psych evaluator down here. If you want to send a pair of stormtroopers to escort him up to the med psych unit, by all means do so. He's obviously not in his right mind, though. Send your toughest troopers. This guy's dangerous, sir. And my operating number is 527-345-009, sir. I'd appreciate it if you would include me in your report of this incident, you say, hoping that by sounding as if you want credit for stopping the rampage of a crazed soldier, you may convince the officer that you're really who you say you are. Hope your luck holds on page 112. Thank you, 009, the officer says. You're right about the danger of such a man. How he slipped through Imperial training is beyond me. If you don't have a visit from a psych evaluator in the next hour, please contact me immediately and I will see to it. Yes, sir, you snap. Thank you, sir. The officer signs off and you breathe a long sigh of relief. You turn to find Han and Chewie staring at you. Not in my right mind, huh? Han asks. You can say that again. Otherwise, I never would have come down here with you two farmhands. Tatooine must breed insanity. Chewbacca growls something and pats you on the back. You look at Han for some translation. You did good, kid, Han says reluctantly. I was having a bit of trouble there. Turn to page 96. You're just impatient, you tell him, and not scared enough of dying. Hey, he says, I'm not the one who dragged us down here to get some girl nobody's ever seen. You smile. Han's right, of course, but you know that Leia has to be saved. I've got your R2 unit, you hear Luke saying as he comes back down the corridor with Princess Leia at his side. I'm here with Ben Kenobi. Ben Kenobi, she cries. Where is he? You watch as Han's eyes widen. He is obviously taken by the princess. She is pretty and very confident, a person used to commanding others. The old man's doing his part to make sure we get out of here, Han says gruffly, then turns to Luke. Can we go now, or is there anywhere else you want to free? You've got an attitude problem, flyboy, Leia snaps at Han. Better stow that, or it'll get you killed. Maybe you prefer it back in your cell, your highness, Han grumbles. You can watch more of their fighting on page 79. From the looks of my rescue squad, I might be better off, Leia retorts, but you can tell that she's being sarcastic. It occurs to you that Leia and Han are not all that different. As they continue to argue, you and Luke put your stormtrooper helmets back on, and Han follows suit. You put the shackles back on Chewie and walk behind the Wookiee and Leia with blasters. You really think this will work? Leia asks doubtfully. You guys don't look a lot like stormtroopers. It's how we got down here, princess, you say. And it does work. In no time, you're back on the same level as the landing bay. In the corridor, you meet up with Ben, who's sneaking along, somehow undiscovered by the stormtroopers. It must be his command of the Force, you reason. He must somehow be controlling the soldiers so that they don't notice him. It's incredible. Turn to page 56. Ben and Leia greet each other warmly, and Ben tells her how sorry he is about the fate of Alderaan and her father. Sorry to break this up, folks, Han says quietly, but if we don't get moving, they'll have that tractor beam back on and we'll never get out of here. Quite right, Ben says. Luke uses his communicator to reach 3PO, and the droids are already on the ramp of the Falcon when you enter their landing bay. As they turn to greet you, they suddenly shout in alarm. Stormtroopers are coming up behind you, but you're far enough ahead to escape. You and Luke fire blaster rifles at them to hold them off, and the ship's engines ignite. You scramble on board as the ramp closes and the ship rockets away. Fly to page 47. When you land at the Rebel base, you plan a Rebel attack against the giant space station that Leia calls the Death Star. Using the plans hidden in R2, Rebel engineers find a flaw in the space station. Thanks to Luke's flying and aim, you and Han's backup, the Death Star is destroyed, and Darth Vader is lost in space in a crippled spacecraft. With the destruction of the Death Star and the return of the Order of the Jedi, the Empire is dealt several blows from which it will never recover. As time passes, Ben Kenobi begins a new Jedi training program. You and Luke are his first students, and a short time later, Leia joins the school as well. The end. All right, well, there's lots of interesting ways that we can either be faithful to the movie or fly completely off the rails. But flying completely off the rails is probably the more fun kind. Thanks for joining me. May the 4th be with you.